single day. I'm gonna make something great.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Hope Base, a place where we share stories of people who have survived one form of abuse or another in order to encourage those who are going through similar situations to find hope and strength to overcome their challenges. If you have survived one form of abuse or another and you want to share your story to encourage others, feel free to write in. Our email address is thehopebase@gmail.com. My name is Oisegod. Before we go into the story for today, let's go for a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Last week we shared a touching story of Rose, a domestic violence survivor. And in case you missed that episode, I'll leave the link below. Today we have a story from Eno. Eno wrote in from Calabar and she wants us to share her story. Let's dive right in. I was 16 when Manuel came from Lagos to ask for my hand in marriage. I never knew him before. I saw him discussing with my father in the living room, but I had no idea what they were talking about. Earlier that day, my mom had prepared a very delicious meal, saying that they were expecting a very important visitor. When he came, she made me serve them the meal. I saw the way he looked at me. I was quite uncomfortable, but I paid him no mind. He was about 36 years or thereabouts. They just sat there and decided my future like I had no say in it. When he left, my dad called me into his room and started an episode that lasted for over an hour. He told me how we were poor and how the family needed someone that would liberate us from poverty. After the long story, he told me that the man I saw earlier had come to ask for my hand in marriage and that he was well-to-do and that he lives in Lagos. I was dumbfounded. 1, I had a boyfriend. 2, I was only 16 and marriage was the last thing on my mind. 3, I didn't know him. 4, he was over 20 years older than me. 5, I had not even finished high school. 6, everything was wrong about it. You are not saying anything, my father asked after observing my silence for a while. I told him that if it was because of the money, that they can forget about paying my school fees, that I would sell fish to pay my fees. My village is bordered by water, so sometimes we went fishing, especially during the weekends. Then my father said it was not just about my school fees, that God had sent him into our family and that there was no way he was going to let him slip off our hands. He told me that he has even promised to build him a house in the village. He went on to say that if I was worried about my age, that it was nothing to worry about, that my mother was that young when he met her. His mind was made up. He told me to go and think about it, that he will be coming with his family in the coming month for introduction and then marriage. I told him there was nothing to think about, that I cannot marry him, that I don't love him. He laughed as if what I said was stupid. Then he said, love doesn't just happen, that I will grow to love him. I told him that I will never grow to love him and that marriage was the last thing on my mind. Then he stood up and told me that I was selfish, that I was only thinking about myself and not the well-being of the family. He got angry and walked away. I sat there and tried to imagine being married to him. The image was awful, unimaginable. I thought about what my father said about me being selfish. It was not the first time he would say a thing like that. One time I went fishing and I sold the fish to be able to buy some books I needed in school. He told me to bring the money I realized from selling the fish, so he would buy some foodstuffs at home, but I refused. I told him I needed the money to buy some books I needed in school. He got angry and said I was selfish. There was nothing more important to me than going to school. I wanted to pursue a career in theater arts. Prior to this time, I had done several stage plays in church and I loved it. People even said I was a good actor, that I should consider pursuing a career in it. I thought I was actually being selfish, but I came to the resolve that it was better to be selfish than to spend the rest of my life with a man I don't love. I told my father that I had thought it through and that nothing will ever make me marry Manuel. He was mad at me. As a form of punishment, he stopped giving me this little pocket money he was giving me to transport myself to school. Even my mother tried to talk me into marrying him, but it yielded no fruit. I had 5 siblings, 3 girls and 2 boys. My 2 brothers were younger and my 3 sisters were older. 2 of them were married, but their husbands were doing menial jobs just to get by, and they lived not too far from our house in the village. They barely had enough to take care of their family, let alone cater for our family needs. Sometimes my sisters would even come home to beg for foodstuffs. My father was full of regrets for giving them out in marriage to those men. According to him, they are nothing but liabilities. They were quite young when my father gave them out in marriage. They just abandoned their education and became full housewives. It was quite sad. My immediate older sister just finished high school then, but had no plans to further her education. She wanted to go into business full-time and was not cut out for marriage. Suitors had come, but she turned all of them down. She was living with one of my aunties at the time because my father had given up on her and even told her to leave his house, that he was no longer responsible for her upkeep. When I told her what my father had planned and what I told him, she congratulated me for being brave. I trekked miles every day to school. Sometimes I would wake up by 4 in the morning because the distance from my house to the school was about an hour 40 minutes walk. It wasn't funny. By the time I get back from school, I would be so spent and I would still have to fetch water from the stream and prepare dinner. After trekking for a week, I decided to find a solution. My boyfriend was also a student, but every time he came back from school, he would go fishing. So I told him that I didn't mind selling some fish after school, that I would give him the money and we would share the profit. He agreed. So I met some restaurants around the area and told them I would be supplying fish to them. Some agreed and then I started. There was no much profit, but at least it was enough to transport myself to school every day. Manuel never stopped coming. The pressure was too much. Every time he came, he would buy foodstuffs and bottles of wine for my father. He even bought dresses for my mom. He bought them over. I rejected all the gifts he bought for me. I didn't even set my eyes on them. Then on one of his visits, he decided to talk with me one-on-one. For 1 hour, he kept bragging about his success, on how Lagos was a big city and that I would love it there. I didn't hesitate to tell him that I was seeing someone and that I love him so much, thinking that that would make him have a change of mind, but no. He even laughed about it and told me that that was a joke, that my boyfriend was only a boy and that he knew nothing about life, and that many years from now, when he becomes a man, that he might even fall in love with someone else. He told me that he was giving me a chance to a better life, as if he was God. I couldn't stand his arrogance. I just couldn't wait for the meeting to end. He told me to think about it and give him a response fast, that I wasn't the only fish in the water, that other families were even begging him to marry their daughter, that I should consider myself lucky. I hated him more for saying that. I had never seen a man so arrogant. He got up and told me to think about it. I just sat there dumbfounded. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I was still in shock how someone can be so full of himself. Let's go for a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue the story. Stay glued. Welcome back. My mother kept persuading, but I told her that I didn't want to hear anything about him anymore. My father stopped talking to me. I was ruining his chance of becoming a landlord. He was actually the one being selfish. He wanted to enjoy while I spent my life in misery and regrets. I started thinking of moving out of the house, but I thought of my younger brothers. They needed me around. I had to stay back and bear the mess just so I could be there for them. One day, my immediate younger brother, Ep2, fell terribly ill. We administered all the herbs we could lay our hands on, but nothing helped. His health condition kept deteriorating by the day. My father wanted to take him to the hospital, but there was no money to pay the hospital bills. I ran to my boyfriend to see if he could raise me anything, but what he had would barely transport us to the hospital. I knew where the whole situation was heading, and I didn't want it to get there. I ran to my older sisters, but I regretted even going there. They told me how they had not eaten for days. I even felt bad for them, that I gave them the little money I got from my boyfriend. I came back home with nothing. My father looked at me like a piece of shit. My mother wouldn't stop crying. Ep2's temperature kept going high. Even the damp cloth that was used to cool his body eventually became hot. My mother walked up to me that if I had agreed to marry Manuel, that all these won't be happening, that they would have comfortably begged him for money. I told her that she shouldn't say that Ep2's life was in God's hands. My father just stood up from where he was sitting, looked me in the eyes and said, "If Ep2 dies, I will never forgive you," and walked away. I just stood there stumped. I didn't know what to do. Then I went into my room and prayed. I pleaded with God to heal my brother. I was still praying when I heard my mother scream. I ran out from my room and saw her carrying Ep2 in her hands. He was already foaming in his mouth, almost lifeless. I was confused. She rushed out of the living room and was heading towards a herbalist home. I followed suit. When we got there, the herbalist managed to calm the situation, but he was still terribly ill, but not as bad as he was when we got there. I went back that night and thought about all that my father had said. I couldn't sleep because I thought about it all through the night. I tried again to imagine living with Manuel. It just didn't work. But then again, I thought about Ep2 and how I was in a better position to help him. Was it worth the sacrifice? I thought about Mba, my boyfriend. I thought about my future. Will I ever grow to love him like my father said? It was tough, but I needed to make a decision that night. I didn't like that my father saw me as the one hindering his progress. The next morning, I told my father that I would marry Manuel, but only on one condition, that he allows me to go to school and pursue my dreams. He told me that it wouldn't be a problem at all, that he's sure that Manuel wouldn't object to that. The smile that decorated his face all of a sudden knew no bounds. He immediately called Manuel and told him that he should come with his family for the necessary marriage rites, but that he should assist with the hospital bills to take Ep2 to a proper hospital. Without wasting time, Manuel sent the money needed to take Ep2 to the hospital and some more money for other things that he might need. Ep2 was rushed to the hospital and he started responding to treatment. Meanwhile, Manuel came with his family for the introduction. I just sat there the whole time, but my mind was not there. In my place, once you are done with the introduction, you are as good as married. Manuel wanted to take me immediately to the city, but I told him that I had some exams I needed to write, that once I was done with them, I would join him. He agreed. I also told him that I was only going on with the marriage if he would allow me to pursue my dreams. He said that that was not a problem, that he would make sure that he took me to the best schools in Lagos. 2 weeks later, Ep2 was discharged from the hospital. When he learned what I had done, he was not happy about it. He said I would have trusted God to heal him. I assured him that it was okay, that it was the least I could do for peace to reign in our home, and that I was happy that it paid off at least. I finished my exams and went to join Manuel. A day after I got to Lagos, I received news from village that Ep2 died. My mother said he was perfectly okay that night, but that he went to sleep and never woke up. I cried my heart out. Ep2 was the reason I got myself into this mess, and now he was no more. I was heartbroken. I didn't know what to do. Manuel did all he could to console me, but it didn't help. And then, to make matters worse, he came to me that night and said he wanted to make love to me. I couldn't believe my ears. I was mourning the death of my brother and all he could think about was sex. I was so angry that I got up and left the bedroom for him. He asked where I was going, but I paid him no mind. I went and slept in the living room that night. A month after my little brother was buried, Manuel and I officially got married according to the custom of our land. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I thought of running away, but I didn't have the courage to. The only thing I held on to was the fact that Manuel was going to take me to school and that I would eventually pursue my dreams of becoming an actor. We came back to Lagos together after a week. People came visiting and congratulating us. Some even bought gifts for us. Manuel was quite popular in the area. I saw how some of the women that came around looked at me like, what in the world would this small girl be doing with a man almost old enough to be her father? I was quite shy, but I tried not to show it by putting on a fake smile. I was already getting tired of the constant visits. One woman would not stop visiting. I never knew she was actually having affairs with my husband. Anytime she was around, Manuel would always send me on one errand or the other. One day I came back from one of the errands and saw Manuel spraying perfume in the bedroom while the woman was in the bathroom washing up. Manuel was sweating profusely and his penis was standing. It was obvious that he had just gone for a round of sex. When I asked him what she was doing in the bathroom, he just said she was pressed and needed to use the toilet. Interestingly, I wasn't jealous. My only concern was him not infecting me with STDs, and that aspect was covered because he was always protected. 2 months passed and Manuel was not saying anything about my going back to school. I still needed to complete Senior Secondary 3 and then sit for WAEC. So I told Manuel to help me find a school so I can complete my senior secondary education, and he agreed. Days turned to weeks and weeks to months and he did nothing about it. He kept giving me flimsy excuses. So I decided to look for one myself. I talked to some of my neighbors and they helped. I found a school not too far from the house. They gave me their fees and all the requirements to start. That evening, out of excitement, I told Manuel that I had found a school and showed him the fees and all that was needed to start, but his response was far from what I expected. "So you are going to wear school uniform in my house?" he asked. "It's only for one session and I'll write my SSC exams," I replied. Immediately he stood up and said, "Not in my house." I followed him from behind and pleaded. I reminded him of his promise to send me to school and that was the only reason I agreed to marry him. He just turned and said he will not allow me to make a mockery of him. That when I'm done having his children and raising them to a reasonable age, I can then decide if I still want to go to school or not. I was weak. I didn't know what to do. I even told him that if he's bothered about me wearing school uniform, that I can register in an adult school. All I was interested in was preparing for my senior secondary school exam that would qualify me to enter the university, but he refused. I started thinking of how to leave him. I started saving the little money I could lay my hands on. 2 weeks to the day I had planned to leave, I found out that I was pregnant. That further compounded the issue. I didn't tell him I was pregnant. I talked to a friend who took me to a doctor to run some tests with the little money with me. I wanted to abort the pregnancy. After the test, the doctor told me that aborting the pregnancy was a very delicate option because I stood the chance of either losing my life in the process or not being able to conceive again. Let's go for a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue the story. Welcome back. I changed my mind and decided to keep it. I still didn't know if to run away with the pregnancy or to tell Manuel about it. So many things ran through my head. I thought of how I was going to cater for my unborn child if I decided to leave him. I also thought of what people were going to say and the disgrace it would bring to my parents. In my place, it was considered a taboo if a woman leaves her husband's house. Well, I chose the latter and told Manuel I was pregnant. He was so excited that he began to call his family members to break the news. That night, he prepared dinner. I thought I was dreaming until he said, "Don't get used to it. I'm only doing this for our baby boy." Instantly, I felt like a deflated balloon. At this point, we had not yet done scan to determine the baby's sex, but he kept saying it was going to be a boy. His craze for a male child knew no bounds, to the point I even feared what his reaction would be if it turned out to be a girl. I started praying that God should bless us with a male child. We eventually went for scan and it was a boy. He was so excited that he started buying clothes and toys for him. He brought his mom to live with us to help with house chores. She constantly gave me rules on what and what not to do. If I objected to anyone, she would remind me that I was only a child and that I knew nothing about life. She made my life a living hell. I only ate what she wanted me to eat. I had no say in anything. I felt used, like I was only a childbearing machine. Manuel's mom made me feel like the life of the baby I was expecting was far more important than my life. This was far from what I wanted in life. I never imagined getting married at 16, talk more of expecting a baby at 16. Every single day that passed, I found a way to encourage myself and to endure the torture I was subjected to. A few months passed and our first baby was born. 2 years later, our second son was born. In 5 years, we had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. At this time, I was already 22 years and I wasn't sure what direction my life was going to take. Manuel wanted us to have more children, but I objected, considering that my last baby was born through CS. I almost died. I told myself that I was done with childbearing. He kept pushing for more kids, but I refused. I was 22, but I was looking like I was 40. Nothing made me angrier than when ladies that were way older than me would call me auntie. But I didn't blame them because I grew very old in 5 years. I became a full housewife and worked my ass out, taking care of our children, cleaning the house and making sure that food was always served on time. That was my everyday routine. One day I told Manuel that I needed a job, that I was tired of staying at home. Then he said, "Who will employ you? You don't even have a school cert." Out of annoyance, I snapped. "Whose fault is it that I don't have a school cert?" I asked, trying to control the anger that had welled up in my bowel. "It's your fault, not mine," he replied, walking away from me. That was when I lost it. I held him by his collar and pulled him back. Then he pushed me. I fell to the ground. "What is wrong with you, woman? Do you want to fight me?" he asked. I stood up and confronted him. I told him everything I had bottled up for years. I told him how I regretted marrying him, that he was not a man of his words. He clenched his fist as if to hit me. I didn't mind him and let out all the anger in me. Then he said that the people I'm mingling with are beginning to confuse me, that I was innocent when he picked me up from the village. He went on to say that as long as I remained his wife, that he will never allow me to work, that my work is to train his children and to satisfy his every need. Another 10 years passed and I was still where I was. My children grew older before my very eyes. It dawned on me how old I had become when my daughter ran up to me one afternoon crying that she had seen blood stains in her skirt. She was already beginning to menstruate. She was 11 at the time. I bought pad for her and told her it was normal and then educated her on what to expect. I would rather die than see her make the same mistake I made. My fourth son passed his JAMB and SSC exams and was getting ready to get into the university. My second son was already in his senior secondary too. I was a bit relieved because my children were the only reason I was still stuck to Manuel. I couldn't wait for them to all become adults so I can be free. One day I went to buy foodstuffs to cook when I saw some film crew filming in my neighborhood. I was so thrilled that I stood there and watched them. I wished I was the one in front of the camera. Then I approached one of the actors and told her that I liked what they were doing and that I would like to act. She was very friendly. Instantly, she told me about an upcoming audition and gave me all the details. She asked if I could attend and I replied with an emphatic yes. I collected her phone number and told her I would call her. On the day I was supposed to attend the audition, Manuel didn't go to work. I started thinking of what to tell him. I wanted to go for the audition at all costs. Then I came up with a lie. I told him that one of my friends that had given birth needed some assistance with taking care of her child, that I was going to help her. He agreed and I zoomed out. I went for the audition and I did really well, even though I was new to the whole process. It was my first time to see a film script. All the while I acted in church as a child, we never used a script. It was all improvised. Luckily, I got a minor role and was told when I would be coming on set. Meanwhile, I thought of what I was going to tell Manuel. I never knew my friend I had lied of going to see had already dropped by my house. So Manuel already learned that I was not in our house. I was on my way home when Manuel called to ask where I was. When I told him I was on my way from my friends, he shouted at me to stop lying and tell him where I went. I quickly cut the call. He kept calling, but I did not pick. I started thinking of what to do. When I got home, Manuel was in the living room. He was visibly swollen with anger. I knew there was going to be war, but I was ready for him this time. I was 33, no longer the naive 16-year-old girl. We will do a quick commercial break here. And when we come back, we'll continue the story. Don't go nowhere. Welcome back. Where are you coming from? He asked gently. He was boiling with anger, but I didn't care. I told him the truth, that I went for an audition. He asked why I lied to him, and I told him that he wouldn't have allowed me to go if I had told him the truth. He stood up and walked closer to me. So this is what you do when I'm not in the house? He asked. I told him that I didn't understand what he meant by that. He said that I had gone to see a man and that I was using the audition to cover up. I was furious. I told him I was not seeing anyone, that I was actually coming from an audition. I even showed him the film script I was given. He tore the script and held me by the throat, screaming, "Who is he?" I gasped. I was trying to tell him that there was nobody, but the words were not coming out. He kept screaming, "Who are you seeing?" His hands held my throat tightly that I couldn't breathe anymore. When it was obvious that Manuel wasn't ready to let go of my throat, I started kicking him, but to no avail. He held me even tighter. Luckily for me, Naomi, our daughter, came back from school. He quickly withdrew his hands and I fell to the ground. I managed to catch my breath. Manuel still slapped me and said, "It's not over yet." "Dad, what's going on?" Naomi asked, running to hold me. Manuel ignored her and walked away. Naomi asked me why we were fighting. I was still trying to recover from the strangulation, and in the process, I was thinking of a perfect lie to tell her. I couldn't think of anything. I just burst into tears. Naomi held me and pleaded with me to stop crying. I was so ashamed of myself. That night, Manuel still confronted me with a question. He kept asking who I was cheating on him with. I gave him the number of the actor that told me about the audition. I told him to call her and ask her if I'm lying. He called and she confirmed it. As soon as he cut the call, he said, "I won't stop you from acting. But if you step out of this house to that film set, don't ever think of coming back. You have a choice." I didn't blame him. I already gave him everything he wanted, children. Now I can go to hell. I thought about all he said. I thought about the mistake I made several years ago that landed me in this mess. I wasn't ready to make the same mistake. At this stage in my life, I was ready for anything. I thought of dying a loyal wife without fulfilling my dreams, which was worse. I still had 2 weeks to decide. I knew deep down what I wanted, but I didn't want to be selfish. I weighed everything weighable. I spoke to the people I could speak with. Some were positive, majority were negative. In fact, one of my friends told me I would be making the biggest mistake of my life if I leave my husband because of a mere passion. At this point, I knew better. I knew that any form of relationship that would not allow me to pursue my dreams wasn't worth it. When it was time to leave for the movie set, I started packing my things. But before then, I called my children together and told them to expect changes. I told them how much I loved them and encouraged them to be strong and not to allow anyone to look down on them. I talked as if I wasn't going to see them again. I didn't know what Manuel was up to, but I was prepared. As I was preparing to leave, Manuel was just looking at me. He thought I would change my mind, but I didn't. The moment I walked out the door, I felt a cool breeze caress my spine. I had not gone very far when his message came into my phone. Don't even think of stepping your feet in this house again. You will hear from my lawyer. I cried. I really didn't know why I was crying, but the tears didn't stop flowing. I was ready to take life by the horn. I knew it was going to be tough, but I was ready for the ride. He reported me to my parents. They kept calling to scold me, but I shut out everybody. He filed for divorce and gladly I signed the papers. It wasn't too long I heard he had remarried. I wasn't shocked because he had threatened me several times he was going to marry a second wife. Funny enough, she was someone I knew. I wished them well and moved on. At least I was allowed to see my children anytime I wanted. I went to live with Agatha, the woman that told me about the movie audition. I gathered the little money I got from some of the films I did and got some training on acting. I also took some training on makeup and special effects. After a few years, I started getting jobs as a makeup artist. It was quite lucrative that I opened a shop and started a cosmetic line. That didn't stop me from acting once in a while. I also started a TV show that eventually became a household TV show. My parents and everyone that thought I was stupid had a change of mind. I still want to get married, but no pressure. People need to understand that getting married is not the reason we came to this earth. Everyone on earth has a mission to accomplish. Spouses are only added to our lives to help foster our passion and not to kill them. At the end of the day, we will only be accountable for the talents we were given. Don't let anything stop you from bringing your talents to life. If you have been touched by this story, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And if you know someone that seriously needs to see this, don't hesitate to share it with them. You might save a soul by sharing this video with them. If you have survived domestic violence, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, child abuse, whatever form of abuse, and you want to share your story with us, feel free to write in. Our email address again is thehopebase@gmail.com. Don't forget, as long as you have breath in your nostrils, you have hope. Till I come your way again next week, my name is Oise God Center Bode. Have a beautiful day.